All right. So we're connecting, and with me, we have a panel of mixed school students, including Elias. Of course, everyone knows him being the founder of FHS Hacks. And we would like to mention he is also an incoming Make School student. Now, obviously, you know, talking about life at Make School means we have to talk about people who are already in Make School. So let's go ahead and welcome Donica
Hi.
and then Alexandru
Hello.
and Zane
Hey, how you doing?
and Luis.
Hey, how's it going?
And coming back on, Tanya.
Hey everyone, I am not a Make School student, but I am a Make School family member. And these are some of my awesome students and a future awesome student.
Yeah, there you are. And obviously for me, having worked at Make School before, I am no longer affiliated, sadly, because I've seen the campus. I still remember those days. It was a lot of fun. But obviously we're here to find out how has that changed? Because 2016 to now, Make School has gone through a lot of massive, just phenomenal transformations. So let's go ahead and start with, in that same order, Donica. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're studying.
So my focus is in front-end web. When you say a little about myself, do you just mean like miscellaneous things, or do you want me to talk?
Yeah, sure. If you want to mention where you're from, what led you to apply to Make School in the first place.
So I am from Santa Cruz, California, and I actually found out about Make School through a Girls Who Code event. So I'm a Girls Who Code alumni, and I want to say it was like a year and a half ago, times a construct. Anyways, I signed up for this Girls Who Code event that was kind of like a speed dating round to meet women that were in tech, and Make School hosted it, and they also had an informational booth. At the time I was at community college and I was kind of starting to think about where I wanted to transfer to. So I asked for more information, which led me to touring the campus and finding more out about the school.
All right, all right. And moving on to Elias, who is not quite there yet, but tell your story again.
Um, I think I've told this like 100 times now with you, Scotty. But
Yeah,
basically, my journey with Make School started around January when I found out about them during a hackathon that they sponsored, and from there I was like, oh, this seems interesting. So did some research. I found out, wait a minute, I could get my degree in 2 years. So I was like, I definitely want that because me personally, I knew my skill set level. I knew where I was at, and this was like without any college level work. So I was like, I need a special school. So after that, I was very heavily involved in the community, such as the community showcase. That's where me and you met. Um, and yeah, it just happened to be the only school I applied to. So
that's great.
yeah,
Because we both know that you're like me. If we didn't get into the one school we applied to, um,
yeah,
well, let's just
that's a
not talk
different
about how
discussion.
disastrous that
Yeah,
would have been.
yeah.
So next up we have Alexandru. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So my journey started back in 2017, 2018, when I was looking for a summer boot camp or something to do during summer. And I was looking mainly for CS programs, and I came across Make School Summer Academy for iOS development. And I felt like I didn't expect to get accepted, so I just applied for it and forgot about it. And then a couple of months later, I got an email saying that, oh, you got accepted to this iOS development bootcamp. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I think I had like an interview process, and then I decided to come to San Francisco in California for the bootcamp during the summer. And that's when I realized how different the education is between back at home in Romania and here how May School does it. Because in my school, everything is mostly theory based. Like we learn about a subject and we'd memorize that topic, or like solve a couple exercises and then take a test. But here everything is project based. So after taking that bootcamp, I put like at the top of my list make school as a college option. And the years passed on, and I finally got to the point where I had to apply to colleges. And funny enough, the only college I applied was make school, got accepted, and here I am.
Clearly, another story that ends very well because there was no other ending possible. So moving on, we come to Zane.
Sure. Well, first I just say, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be a part of this event. And of course, I'm also a senior. I came to make school in 2019, and now I'm studying data science. But for a long time, I didn't really know that would be in technology. So a couple things, right? Like what you should know about me is my grandfather was a big influence on me. If you can believe it, he was actually a sugarcane farmer in Pakistan. So yeah, classic rags to riches story. Came up from basically nothing and made it to a very he did well for himself, and he encouraged his kids and grandkids to pursue their dreams. So when I came to make school, well, when I came to the end of high school, I wanted someplace that would give me the edge, right? Someplace that obviously not to pitch make school, but I want to work with real technology, right? We hear from Alexander, who wants to work with projects. And of course, being in the Bay Area, got to work with the network of people in the Bay Area. So I can, all I gotta say is, for me, I can empathize with people who feel like they have to do extra just to be where their other peers may be who come from more privileged backgrounds. So for me, that whether it's a good or bad thing to have that chip on your shoulder, like I empathize with people who have that. And for me, it just I channeled into going to make school.
Yeah, and I want to say the most surprising part to me was that there's sugarcane in Pakistan, because I figured it would be too cold. I mean, it's a warm place, but I figured it'd be too cold for sugarcane. So when you said sugarcane, I was like, oh, I thought that was only in places like Hawaii, but I guess not. Clearly, he did well enough. So congrats to your grandfather. And now moving on to Luis. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well. Well, I'm a junior here at Make School, and the way I actually landed here is it's kind of a long story, but I'll try to make it short. So I before I came here, I was actually attending a community college in Norwalk, Cerritos College, for computer science, and I was going along pretty well. I was just about the point where I was going to begin applying for transfers to well, my dream schools were like UCs and stuff like that. But as it so happens, I actually met a Make School alumni through a video game. We met through Final Fantasy 14 online, and we became friends afterwards. And then I was talking to him about my experiences at school. I was kind of unhappy because, like, despite everything, I come from a not very well off family, and I was the only one who was actually going through college at the time in my family that I could think of. And so what ended up happening was he ended up telling me about Make School and about everything that it was offering. And all of that sounded really appealing to me. And then next thing I knew, by September of 2020, I ended up coming up here to San Francisco. And then here I am now in my second semester at Make School.
All right. And Tanya, we'll go ahead and mention you again, although you're not studying. Clearly you play a big role and have played a big role in getting all of these amazing people on screen. But of course, how they got on screen, they first have to go through you.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking as everyone was speaking that I joined Make School just about 2 years ago. I'll be celebrating my 2-year anniversary very soon. And so there's not a single person on this panel right now, minus you, Scotty, whose application I didn't read, whose transcripts I didn't read. I did one-on-ones with at least half of you. And it's such an awesome experience. My background is in higher education and in recruiting. I started when I was in college, actually. I started as a student worker. And my background is in the fine arts and performing arts. And when I was leaving school, also coming from a not privileged position and I needed a job, I asked myself, what do I really love? Well, I love working in recruitment. I love working with other students. I love helping students find the right program from them. But traditional higher ed has a lot of bureaucracies, and traditional education is a little bit stagnant. Not much has changed since the 1800s. And so when Make School approached me to come work for them, I was hooked. I was ready. I was like, yes, this is what I want. I want a school that's thinking about systemic issues like financial problems. I want a school that's thinking about getting underrepresented communities at the forefront. I want a school that's about project-based because that's how I learn best. And I know many others learn best. So it's very easy for me to work here and talk about the positives of the school because I really believe in the mission we're doing and I believe in the work I see my students do.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I guess let's go through why each person is attending Make School. In this case, let's go in reverse order, which Tanya, you kind of mentioned that. So we'll go back to Luis.
All right. As for why, that's actually kind of an interesting question because I've always loved computers. And that's why I went into computer science as early as a little bit of high school. But even through community college, I obviously took computer classes, but I found myself dissatisfied with the classes because not to disrespect the school itself, but I did have a couple of classes where the teachers were kind of not very engaged with the students. I remember one of the worst cases was that the professor for one of my classes actually quit his job 6 weeks into our 6 weeks into our class. And at that point, I was just like, wow, is this what it's going to be like for me in the future and moving forward? But by the time I kept reading about Make School as I was considering it as an option, I kept hearing about how everyone on the staff is always trying to engage. They actively encourage students to seek out help and have conversations with them. And I wasn't completely sold on it at first, but I decided to give it a chance. And once I had finally joined, I realized that they weren't kidding. Every sort of resource, every sort of help that they can provide, is that they're willing to extend that to you as long as you're willing to reach out too. And I think that's the most important thing to me. And now that I'm here, that I realize that that's why I'm attending this kind of school.
Yeah, that's great. And this hasn't come up quite yet, but you also mentioned, at least in your email, you mentioned that you're also a big fan of music composition, video editing. I guess those are just some of the fun things you like to do outside of class.
Oh yeah, those are my side hobbies.
Nice. Are they related to what you do in tech at all, or are they just completely different?
I haven't found a way to integrate the things that I like outside of strictly programming, but I'm hoping to one day be able to contribute to a sort of any of the live streaming websites or any of the big websites that support live streaming, such as YouTube or Twitch and so on. Yeah. Because I love streaming for fun, and that's a big motivator for me to keep programming, because if I can be part of a team like that contributes to making that kind of website that allows for people to connect throughout the world through live streaming and playing video games and all that, that's exactly the kind of thing that I want to go for.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes there are things that are just completely disconnected from our main hobby, our main personality, and that's fine.
I think that's healthy, actually.
Yeah. You definitely don't want to be sitting in front of a computer thinking about tech all the time. You want to be able to stretch your limits and, play with some creative things that don't exist in tech. I think, it's like you said, when you're at that previous school and the professor quit after 6 weeks, you want to be able to say, all right, is that it? or is there more? And obviously stretching your creativity, kind of just always being able to evolve, clearly that's a big deal to you.
Yeah, it is.
So let's move on to Zane, who, despite our best efforts, we have not been able to schedule my podcast episode with you due to something minor called COVID-19, which really threw off everyone's schedules. But now that it's 2021, Zane, welcome to my podcast, kind of. It's more of a live stream, but we're finally doing this.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the podcast. And as for why I started Make School, there's probably two big reasons I would mention. I started coding in high school, so that was one of the things I'm grateful for to this day. Is my high school had coding classes, and that obviously I think that getting hooked on it early probably has something to do with it. I learned a lot of good things and bad things from my high school in terms of coding, and we can go more into that if you're interested. But I would say probably one of the first key thing is, and obviously for people who like go to hackathons like this and they started building team projects, they probably already realized it, is once you have, there's a big difference between like what you do in class for coding and then once you actually start building the projects and you have like teams to worry about and like people to also think about. So I got into a little bit of that in high school. I actually built an application using Alexa that would help senior citizens and didn't really go anywhere. So again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, the edge, I knew I wanted to go to a place like Make School where there are already founders here. There are people who go on to work in all these amazing companies, and you can read more about the outcomes on the website, of course. So that was the big motivation. And believe it or not, like I would say less than a month into once I came to San Francisco, I ventured down to a hackathon. Once you're in this space, what I like to say is like, there'll be people who start helping you, right? Once you take that first step. I remember I went to a hackathon right here in well, I'm not in San Francisco anymore, but downtown, was helping two struggling founders with their climate change app. And then, I used some things that I learned right the month earlier in just term one at Make School to help them build their app. And then we were off to races. And before you knew it, I was helping out a startup. The other big thing, and to mention, you mentioned the podcast, was exactly that, the diversity. And so I have to say, I never really thought about it when I was in high school, kind of just go around, again, like a CS school. Like I was always around tech people and things like that. But now I'm glad at Make School, being able to meet other people from other backgrounds. And like any reasonable person, I started the podcast to speak with those other kinds of people. So glad to say now I've spoken with a lot more people. On the show, you'll hear from like Orthodox Jews, field workers, people from the South, all those kinds of stories.
Nice. And what's the name of the podcast?
In the Making. It was started by me and a friend at Make School.
All right. And how can people find it?
So it's in a lot of different places like Spotify and yeah, Google Podcasts. But go to my favorite link is using the small app Anchor FM. They just got acquired by Spotify, so they're not small. But anchor.fm/maker-nation. That's the best place to reach us.
All right. In the Making. So next up, we have Elias, which you mentioned a bit of why you're attending Make School. But in this case, let's go ahead and talk about what you would like to study and why. And of course, you haven't exactly made your decision because you can't declare until you're on campus. But what are some of your thoughts?
So personally, I've been programming for the past 8 years. So I've been exposed to both front end and back end stuff. One thing I told myself is I'll never do data science. That is one thing I will never ever do. It's way above my capabilities as of right now. But
decision in about 2 years when you're graduating from Make School with a data science degree.
You never know. But I really love front end stuff. For me, I like to be all rounded. So I really love full stack development. But if I really had to choose one, it would definitely be front end. that's one area I would love to do, because a lot of the stuff I do is front end. So like creating apps, stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's the one area that I would really focus on.
All right. And
Yeah.
Alexandru, what would you say to all that?
I would say that you definitely need to give a shot to data science. But you need no prior math experience. There's a QL, quantitative literacy in mathematics, that's going to teach you everything you need in Python to data science. And you should definitely try it out. Like, for example, right now, I was doing my DS homework, and I downloaded the Netflix data set of movies and TV shows, and I was analyzing what kind of movies they try to put on Netflix, like how long there are, what kind of audience they're targeting, and it's pretty interesting to see all this data and visualize it.
And
Okay,
in
okay.
case, Elias, in case you're wondering why I went slightly out of order, is because I knew you were going to say that, and I wanted Alexandru to then reply to that. Because, you know, as much as we hate certain elements of tech, you know, for me, I hated web dev, and I was saying I'm going to do iOS, never touch web dev. And instead, the websites for the Civic Code, Rally to Us, Uverse Virus, all these hackathons, I've been building all these websites and saying, no, we don't need to deal with a mobile app, just, a mobile reactive version of the website. And I'm sort of thinking, oh man, this is exactly why I went into iOS and Make School as an instructor, so I could help kids avoid the websites. But yeah, in 2 years from now, when you're getting an offer to do data science at Amazon, you'll thank Alexandru for telling you. So let's move on to Donica.
Hi. So the reason I'm attending Make School, there's like a few reasons. So before I attended Make School, I had taken 4 computer science classes, 3 in community college and then 1 in high school. And in every single one of these classes, I was either the only girl or like one of 2 or 3 in a class of like 30 to 40 people. And that put me off. Also, none of my instructors were female. I just felt very like underrepresented in my classes. With that, I had a few friends that had recently graduated with computer science degrees, and they were telling me how they didn't work on their portfolio when they were in college. So they were kind of like playing catch up after they graduated, and they needed a portfolio to be able to apply to a job, which that also kind of gave me a little bit of anxiety, not gonna lie. The third thing, one of my classes that I took for computer science in community college, we were not allowed to use our laptops or computers.
What?
It was all like, yeah, he would write on the whiteboard the code and didn't like debug or test anything either. He was handwriting everything. We had to take notes. We had to memorize this code basically. And then all of our exams were on paper as well. And I was just thinking, like, how am I supposed to learn like computer science if I can't even code? Like, how is that going to happen? On top of that, the other classes that I did take, like, I did learn code, but it wasn't really anything that like I felt comfortable enough to maybe like make my own website. Like, after taking 4 computer science classes, I felt like I should have felt comfortable making my own website or something, for example. And when I found out about Make School, I was really interested in how everything was project based and also how they have a huge emphasis on diversity. And they purposely hired half of their staff to be female to recruit more women. And I think that's been like probably one of the best things for me, is being able to see like people like me in my classes and having my instructors be women and being able to like get exposure to these women that are successful in the field that I want to go into. And with that, I had the opportunity to join a mentoring program and get 2 female mentors. So it was just, I think that was probably the biggest reason for me for attending Make School.
All right. Yeah, and I think one of the really interesting things is, for me, the professor that helped me get started with computer science, her name is Tabitha Peck, and she, I think, the title. Well, so she's at Davidson College now. I think the title is basically she's in charge of all of comp sci at Davidson. I forgot what the title was, something like department head, in which every school has a different name. But I had a great relationship with her and really loved learning from her. But then in terms of my classmates, there were two that really stood out to me and still stand out to me. One is Sierra Smith from Saratoga in the Bay Area. And I believe she's at Google now. She came in as a freshman and was already probably from week 1 or 2. It was very clear she was by far the best in the entire major. And it wasn't that she came in inherently talented. It's just that we could tell she was putting in the effort. But on top of that, she understood things very quickly. So half the time I'd be in recitation. Hey, Sierra, I don't get it. What does that if loop mean? Wait, Scotty, do you mean an if statement? Yes. So clearly I had to figure that stuff out. And then another one, Anna Miyajima from Arcadia in the LA area. And I think she might also be at Google now. I can't remember if she got a new job. But both of them really stood out. And Anna, I remember what stood out was there was a weekend where I guess I saw her on a Monday. She told me, I saw her on Monday. I was like, hey, everything okay? I saw you on Friday and this. And she said, yeah. Honestly, it was just such a bad weekend, but I feel like I finally figured something out. And I was like, oh, what happened? And the way she explained it, she was working on a group project, felt like she didn't know anything going on. She went back, feeling devastated, woke up Saturday morning and just sat down and read through all the documentation for Java. And I was like, what? For Java? That's a lot of documentation. She said, well, I got to know it. And I thought, well, that's true. I always say the same thing in basketball. If someone's better than you, how do you beat them? Well, you got to practice. And she said, basically the same thing. So, Donica, like you said, to be able to say, all right, it's not just stuff on the whiteboard, it's to actually practice it. I felt like Professor Peck really taught that really well for all of us. It wasn't just theory, it was actually, hey, how do you apply it? And then for Sierra and Anna to say, hey, we're here to dominate. We don't care who's who. We're just here to do this. Because they were both freshmen. And I was sitting here thinking, I still have to remind myself it's not an if loop. So clearly, like you're saying, Donica, having that representation, being able to say, look, there is 50% of the world, give or take, that can do just as well. So, let's make sure everyone gets a shot. So, we've talked about who each of you are, what you're studying, why you picked Make School. I guess, some of the things that we often wonder, as a society, why does tech matter? Anyone, feel free to say what you think.
I think a big thing is accessibility. I mean, think of all the things that technology has been able to open up for people that have disabilities that in the past they weren't able to. Like, for example, my brother has dyslexia, and because of technology, he's been able to excel and do better in school than he probably would have without it. We also have blind, you can have your computer read back to you. You can talk to your computer and it'll type it out for you. We have translating apps now. Like, if you can't understand someone, you can just type in what you want to say into your translator. I think that's a really big thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And just going off of that, I think the overall thing is social impact that technology has. So for example, there's a project that me and my friends created. It was a pill dispenser, and the whole purpose of it was to reduce drug overdose. So for those that are on prescribed medication, the only way that they'll be able to get that medication is if the doctor approves of it, and after then, it dispenses the medication. So I think to me, it's more of for the greater good as a social impact. That's why tech is important.
To tie into what Elias said, if you think back like 40 years ago when you tried to like reach to people with your product, it had to like pay millions and millions of dollars in marketing, like print on newspaper, billboards, and stuff like this. But now having everything digital, you can instantly reach millions of people just making a tweet on Twitter. And if somebody like if a big person from there retweets that thing, you're instantly gonna get a couple thousands, couple hundred of thousands reach to that thing. And just the impact that you can get from technology is very powerful.
I think I'll just chime in here. I'll definitely give the counterpoint to this and say, if you look at pictures from 1920, go back 100 years, you'll see a lot of people. I actually saw this meme on social media. So think about this. Back before the pandemic, you go to a lot of different public spaces. Say you go to a coffee shop. What are most people doing? Looking down at their phones, maybe not having conversations. You go back to 100 years. I saw this meme where you had a row of people all in a coffee shop. They're all looking down, newspapers. So maybe some things don't change, but I definitely I would say +1 to what Elias and Danica said. Tech is just, and also Alexander, is part of disruption, right? And for me, this came really useful. I grew up as my dad had a retail store, and in the pandemic, his store had to be closed. Like a lot of stores got closed down. When it opened up again, it was a lot harder to really connect with people, right? Because you're wearing masks, all these things. So for me, that turned into building an app called TinyDoor, which was using AI to basically do customer analytics. So using basically the cameras in the store to read people's facial expressions, and then based off that, figure out how well they were doing that day, things like this. So I would say tech is just another way to create, right? It helps you with the kinds of business you want to have, or like the family members you want to take care of, the kind of problems you have. It's just another way to create, another way to reach the people you want to reach.
I'd like to pitch in if that's okay now. Sorry, just I was struggling to think of something specific, but then it clicked. So I might be a little biased in my perspective of telling this story, but a couple of years ago, I was actually diagnosed with cancer, and I was going through chemotherapy. Now, the problem was at the time I was attending classes in college, and I didn't want to lose out on that experience despite what was going on with me at the time. But unfortunately, my hospital was at least an hour away from my college. And so there was no way I was going to be able to attend that normally. But that was made possible because of online applications that allowed me to attend my class remotely, to do my assignments remotely. And I know I'm not the only one who has benefited from that sort of technology. I know Zoom helped. I know that this wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have a way to record and upload videos, such as through YouTube. And I know if certain websites didn't exist, I believe the website we were using at the time was Canvas. And that was what we were using to proctor our exams and submit our assignments and all that. 20, 30 years ago, that wouldn't have been possible. There are people who, if you couldn't attend the class in person, you weren't going to be able to learn. And now look at us today in a pandemic where we have to stay at home and everyone has to be attending classes through Zoom. Everyone has to be submitting their assignments through whichever website that their respective school uses. And that wouldn't have been possible, like I said, 20, 30 years ago, and at least not nearly as efficiently as it is now. And that's why I think being able to develop technology is such an important thing, because imagine all the students in high school, middle school, elementary school who rely on this technology now. Suddenly it's not just a thing that that applies to a few fringe cases. It's now considered a norm of sorts, and we so many people would have no access to their traditional education without this sort of technology, which is why I consider it so important.
Yeah, definitely. I think earlier, Zane, you mentioned the disruption of tech. I think one really important thing is we often forget that tech isn't just digital. So if we think of it in terms of communication, we started off with maybe a tribe with some towns, right? Maybe the towns aren't that far apart, it's just maybe a couple different camps. But every time there's some tribal decision, you would have some kind of town crier or someone, usually someone who's really good at speaking, because we can all speak, but some people have better voices, they can project more, they enunciate very clearly. So they're the person who goes and announces, tomorrow we will celebrate this festival. And as we get along through the years, someone starts to figure out we can do writing. Some of these camps move further out, they become towns. You got to travel a day or so. It's no longer feasible to have that town crier go to every town because, we got to celebrate this festival tomorrow. It's better to say, okay, who can write? So then you write this stuff down 5-6 times, you send it to all the different towns. They all know tomorrow, show up, we're going to celebrate this festival. This festival is going to happen. The town crier maybe just does this in the main town. It's a ceremonial thing, but it's become more of an art form rather than a utility. And then when you get to the point of printing, right? Now I need to go to other provinces. I can't just sit here and hand copy and write thousands of copies. I need to just print them very quickly. So, for writing, it might just be kind of official notices in a couple of the provincial capitals, a couple of the bigger cities, just something fancy to kind of put up. Maybe some of these places I'll have a town crier, but in general now word of mouth is no longer useful. Writing, it's no longer as quick as I need. I just print these and I send it out. And in fact, now I might just start printing in multiple cities. Then we get to radio, TV. I think the main thing is every time there's an evolution in communication, the previous form has to evolve into an art form because there's no longer the same value as a utility. And, Zane, like you mentioned, the disruption 100 years ago, everyone has their heads down reading newspapers. Now it's heads down checking their phones, whether it's in my case, a lot of it is this new app called Clubhouse. It's been great for me to be able to speak with people on topics I enjoy and get to know them. For some people, it's more Twitter, being able to write out their thoughts. Some people, it's Instagram saying, here's a picture of what's going on. TikTok, sometimes just, hey, snapshot of my life in video form. So I think, a lot of what you mentioned, obviously right now we're trying to say, how do we use tech in a responsible manner, social media apps and dealing with fake news and all that. So I know that was a bit of a history lesson, but I really want to because you mentioned the disruption, it fits completely with what I described just now. I thought throw that out there. I guess Tanya, as someone who works on staff, how do you feel about that theory?
Yeah, so my undergraduate degree is actually in theater and history, so I always appreciate an impromptu history lesson. There's primary documentation of when people switched to like paper, what we think of now like paper that you throw out, from like tablets in the 17 and 1800s. Like, this will never last. This is some newfangled nonsense that the youths are doing. So every generation deals with it. I hate to be the person who paraphrases Joseph Campbell, but I will be. You can never go back. It is impossible to regress. You only go forward. And when you attempt to hold on to the past, you just stagnate. For me, what I think of as exciting with tech is advocacy. I think a lot about, people like George Floyd, and Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. We would not get a lot of the social activism we're getting right now if it weren't for tech allowing us to record things in time, if it weren't for tech allowing us to share information in real time. This has been pivotal in changing a lot of outdated ideas that many people have about police brutality and gaps in inequity for different marginalized communities. That being said, I also don't want to blow smoke up the butt of tech and pretend that there aren't problems. There are issues of privacy. There are issues of inequity and access. Many students here in the United States, the wealthiest country in the world, don't have constant access to computers. There's an issue of cost. There's an issue of child labor to source these materials and gentrification pushing communities out. But what excites me is the work these students are doing. Like working with the students I work with, I am so excited to see what y'all are gonna do to change so much of this. And I also want to echo what Luis said about, cancer. My sister last year was going through cancer and I couldn't go home because of Corona. It wasn't safe with her being at high risk. And without tech, I would not have been able to call my family. I would not have been able to see my family during a time that was very needed. So I appreciate you opening up about your own story, because I'm sure that wasn't easy. And echoing that there are many benefits to tech, even in the drawbacks.
Yeah, and for me, growing up in small towns, a lot of what I've been doing, a lot of what I do, just recognizing that for me to have been able to go to Duke and then to work at a place like Make School, to be able to be involved with tech, and a lot of times it's stuff that kids I grew up with, we never would have known about this stuff because the information flow was that slow. When I came back and started launching hackathons here, sometimes I mentioned to a student some apps called Venmo. I had to explain to them what it is, where now people know, but 2-3 years ago, if I said to someone in California, hey, just Venmo me, okay. I told students here, they're like, wait, what's that? Oh, it's kind of like PayPal. Wait, what's PayPal? You mean the company? Yeah, well, no, you can send money. You know what? Just bring me cash next time. And it's not that people here don't care or are stupid. It's just that we don't get to hear about things. And, obviously right now we're in the middle of FHS hack. So for Elias to be putting on an online event saying high school students are all welcome, and then saying, you know what, everyone's welcome. This is the kind of stuff that kids like me would never have had. And now that we're all stuck at home, just last night I was talking to a tribal chief for the Navajo. He was saying, we've been left behind to the point that we can't even do online school. Our students are failing out right now because they can't even get the internet to do their assignments, much less turn it in. But we're still judging them based on, why aren't you turning things in on time? And, of course, I'm trying to figure out how do we even get them included into a hackathon when the basic requirement is at least to get online. When half the time you can say, oh, go to a public library, when they don't even have a public library. So, like you said, Tanya, to be able to call with your family and say, hey, I'm not physically there, but spiritually, everything, I'm here emotionally. I think, those are the questions that we need to answer as soon as possible. With the pandemic, we've seen it's no longer who's falling behind, it's who is behind. And it's very clear, who's ahead. So, I'm glad you mentioned that. And Alexandru, I guess for you coming from Romania, obviously your home country, there's been a very different experience with this past year and all that. But at the same time, based on the recent history of Romania, there's also other disadvantages that tech has helped to uncover or overcome.
I would say that since COVID hit Europe and Romania, it brought this light where through apps like Zoom or like Clubhouse, you can interact with a diverse body, a diverse community. Because when I would live in Romania, I'd be in kind of like a tech bubble, like in my own bubble, because I'd be surrounded by the same people every day, by the same community every day. But once everything went online with COVID, I got a chance to interact with people all around the globe, and the same thing applies to Make School. I interact with people in a very diverse body, and that brings to light new ways of thinking. Because like we would think about a solution, like I talk with my buddies about how to solve a problem in CS, and everybody would literally have a completely different idea. And this is very interesting and mind blowing to think, because back at home, I go to school, talk to a couple of people, and we all have the same thinking. But when you come to this environment, there's so much more to learn if you're open minded.
Yeah, great. And as we start wrapping up, Donica, would you like to throw in something real quick?
I don't really have much to say.
That's fine. I mean, I think for you, your experience has been a little more quote unquote normal. Obviously coming from the US, for you it's a little more usual, even though, as we mentioned, there are kids in the US who still lack a lot of what's needed. But at least for you going to make school, the infrastructure, the support structure, it's still there. So I guess that itself actually speaks volumes, the fact that you don't have much to say because you don't need to say much. And then let's go ahead and wrap up with Zane. I guess coming from the East Coast, is there anything that you would say? I mean, obviously your situation is still pretty stable as well, but would you say there's anything that you want to throw in?
Since I know a lot of high school students are listening, I would say, as someone who started coding in high school, don't forget the cost of learning. I think it was really ironic. Whenever I got interested about a subject and then took a class on it, instantly, like, I would go in a lot of excitement, and taking the class would basically kill that excitement. So I would say keep on doing what you all are doing, going outside of going above and beyond to learn computer science, and also make time to have fun. Like that's how you make learning like enjoyable. That's how you make it last. I really recommend the book Learning How to Learn by Barbara Oakley. And even if you don't get the book, like there's a really good Google talks on Google. The author has a lot of good tricks to just make these concepts stick and just become a superstar.
Yeah. And I'd say let's close out with Luis. Luis, you mentioned a lot of what you've had to overcome to get to this point. And clearly you feel blessed by everything.
I feel like I've lucked out. I really have, because a lot of what I've been through is stuff that I didn't really have a say in the matter of. Like, the circumstances behind my upbringing as a child, lower middle class at best. And then I've had to deal with like weird diseases growing up, but not just cancer. I've had like some other stuff, but I'm healthy and past that now. And those are all obstacles that really got in my way getting through school. It's hindered my ability to socialize with people growing up too. So, coming to make school where everything's very community oriented, it's been challenging, but it's also been encouraging. I would say that, technology definitely helped, because I kept moving growing up as a kid. I'd go every 2 years, I'd go to a different city, different school, new friends, all that, having to start over. But the one thing that stayed constant through all that was the computer that I eventually got when I was like, I want to say 7, 8. And that really was where, my passion for this sort of thing sparked from. And I would say that's why I want to make technology available for everyone. I want to make it so that everyone can experience the same sort of joy that I've experienced growing up, despite everything.
All right, thank you for that. And yeah, obviously for a lot of us, feeling very blessed, trying to get back in some way. Now, we do want to wrap this up and get back to FHS Hack. So Mr. Founder, anything you'd like to close out with? Anything coming up?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you who who is watching as well as the panelists. I really appreciate. And to one thing I want to say to the audience is reach out if you're stuck with anything. Find a friend to help you, because I know that I wouldn't be where I am today if I haven't met Scotty. I wouldn't have a hackathon if I hadn't met the people I've met. So connect with people, and you can go really far just with connecting people. So that's all I wanted to say.
All right, all right. And anyone who wants to connect, we will have some contact information in the video description below. Feel free to find us on Discord as well. And most of all, if you're part of FHS Hacks, best of luck to you. Happy hacking. And if you're watching this after, if you've missed it, you can visit thecivicode.org. That's THECIVICODE.org. You can see our schedule. We do have color hacks coming up in 2 weekends. We have other events. We have speakers and workshops. And of course, everyone, please feel free to visit makeschool.com as well, MAKESCHOOL.com. Feel free to get in touch with Tanya to find out more about the admissions process. Maybe join Zane on his podcast. So we hope this has been great for everyone. We hope that you all enjoyed this. Please come visit any of us. Hit us up. We'd be glad to reach out because, like Luis said, we know how hard it can be. And like Donica was saying, she's in a great position. We definitely know what it takes to get to that point. We want to help each and every one of you just be able to get to that point. So wherever you are in life, please feel free to reach out to us.